Hey everybody, it's Andy here over here with the My Side of the Fence podcast. And I've got a super interesting guest today. Guy's been around for a while that I've known for quite some time. Mike Vanderpool, who founded the VFN law firm.
Yeah, founded it. Yeah.
Founded Vanderpool, Frostick Nishanian. They were right across the street from my old office. And I've worked with Mike and his firm, both when I was in elected office and now on the private side. So thanks for coming on, Mike.
Oh, absolutely. I appreciate the invitation.
Sure. So, we try and start off every one of these with a description, sort of like, how did you get here? Where did you grow up?
Yeah, I grew up in a town called the Icebox of Pennsylvania, which, I don't think was put up by the Chamber of Commerce.
Right.
It was a very small village and in a very rural area called the Endless Mountains. And so I migrated from there down to come to law school at Georgetown and was living in Annandale. And then in 1975, when I graduated, my wife and I started looking for houses. And we went to see a townhouse in Springfield. And, even at that time, I was like, whoa, this is really expensive. And I said, well, we've got some townhouses out in Manassas. Go out and take a look. So we came out here and, found a place that we could afford. So part of it was cost. But the other part of it was, from growing up in a relatively rural area, small town setting, I just liked the scale of Manassas. I could tell right away, that this was a place where you could really connect with people and you could get involved pretty quickly.
What year was that?
That would have been, exactly. Somewhere between 75 and 77.
Oh, okay.
Around there.
Okay. Yeah. Manassas was then still somewhat disconnected from the sprawl emanating from D.C.
Yeah, absolutely. I was working and I had a job in Fairfax as an attorney. And one of the things that I was always looking for, even at that point in time, was, well, what's the commute going to be like? Well, right. I drove it and I saw like 5 or 6 cars, maybe 10, on Interstate 66 between Fairfax and Manassas.
Right.
So it has changed a lot. And actually, our first house was over in Point of Woods, and at that point, part of Liberia Avenue was still a dirt road.
Yeah, I remember that.
Yeah.
I remember that. We used to drive off of that paved part onto the dirt part, and drive around and probably do things we shouldn't have been doing. But I remember that part. Yeah. So when you got to Manassas, how long was it before you decided to start your own practice?
About 12, 13 years.
Yeah.
The story there was, my family is an entrepreneurial family. As far back as we can tell, all of my ancestors were involved in businesses of different types, and my father owned a small construction company. So it was just in my blood that I was going to start my own firm at some point in time. And some circumstances happened, and it just happened to be the right time for me to strike out. And I really wanted to have the firm here because I could see what was happening with growth.
Right.
And we, I could see that Manassas was in the path of growth then, it still is.
Yeah.
And that I thought would present a really good opportunity to, begin a business.
And one of the things that you're known for, certainly, the practice handles a lot of different types of matters, but is land use. Mm-hmm. Was your initial, when you started the practice, was it land use?
That was a component of it. When I was in law school, I took every course on real estate I could possibly take.
Is that right?
Yeah. And part of the reason for that was when they looked around, it seemed like the people that were really successful were involved in real estate. Yeah. And so it was like, well, go where the successful people are.
Well, yeah. I mean, it's if you can stand the downturns, it's
Well, yeah, it's anything involving real estate is a little bit of a roller coaster, and you have to keep your powder dry for the downtimes.
So when did you start adding partners to your firm?
I think it's about 2 years after I had started. Randy Frostick joined me as my first associate at that time,
Right.
and then of course became a partner, and we just started growing from then. I think today the firm has about 15 attorneys.
That's amazing.
Yeah, we were even a little bit larger, and then with downturns and coming and going. But yeah, we were identified a few years ago as one of the largest law firms in Virginia.
That's fantastic. That's fantastic.
Yeah, we're proud of that.
So like some of were you involved in like Clover Hill or any of that kind of stuff? Or is that kind of before your?
Yeah, that was before. That was before my time. I was doing mostly commercial cases at that time. I represented 7-Eleven throughout Northern Virginia, and so that was in other businesses. So generally, I was looking more on the commercial side than anything else. And then the other thing that I was doing, and I feel very fortunate to be able to have done this throughout my career, was representing small businesses and mid-sized businesses that wanted to sell.
Oh,
And that really took on steam when we started seeing what are called roll-ups.
yeah.
Where big people want to keep acquiring a large number of the smaller businesses, and then have the ability to use scaling to be able to reduce costs, and then turn around and sell the amalgamation.
That's big in my industry right now.
Yeah, it is. It's big in virtually everything, and there's some real positives to it, and there's some downsides to it, from my perspective. The downside is we're losing a lot of the local businesses, the community involvement that comes from the people that own those businesses. The guys that are doing the roll-ups are not interested in the Little League. And so they don't live here. They don't participate in the community. So
they don't sponsor a golf team for the Rotary Club.
Right, exactly.
Right.
The upside is it allows individuals, and in some cases families that have been around for generations, to actually monetize their life's work.
I get it.
And that to me was very satisfying, to be able to help them do that. Because at the end of the day, you can't stay in business forever, and when you have an opportunity to look at that and say, okay, it's time, to help out those families, recognize some of their wealth and participate in that process was really, really gratifying to me. And Rick Nishanian and I were talking about this a couple of weeks ago, and I think we looked at the firm, and I think the total business sales we've been involved in are probably north of 150 million.
Damn, that's real money.
Not all to one person.
Right.
That was a collection, but that's a number of clients we've helped in that way.
Right. So you moved to Manassas. After a couple of years, you get your firm going. I know that you've been heavily involved in community stuff, and people may not be as familiar with that. So tell us a little bit. You were involved with GMBL, some?
Not with GMBL. There were 3 or 4 things that I really a number of things I focused on. I actually wound up serving on the boards of about 20 different nonprofits over the years.
Right.
And, fortunate to have the opportunity to do that. Background, I think I got started on that when growing up in that small village, was a member of 4-H.
Right.
And, government didn't do everything back in those days, especially in a small town.
Yeah.
And so one of the projects we took on was we made street signs.
You made street signs?
Yes, because there were no street signs. So
like proper metal?
Well, I think they were wood and painted, but
right. Still worked.
Yeah. So that kind of piqued my interest in hey, you can really get involved in a community no matter what, even if you're still relatively young.
Right.
So I'd say the things that I'm most proud of being involved in here were, number one, I helped start a church, a local church, and then a few of the other things was helping start the Freedom Center.
Right.
And then moving on and becoming the first chairman of the Hilton Performing Arts Center.
Right. That was major.
Yeah, that was a big one.
How long did it take to get from that was somebody's idea to we're walking in the door?
Oh, that was probably 7 or 8 years. Kathleen Seafelt and Mayor Gillen, were taking the lead on that together with Bill Reeder from George Mason.
Yeah.
And we worked on that. A group of us worked on that for a long period of time. The earliest one I got involved in was actually construction of what was then used to be called the 234 bypass,
Right.
which is the bypass, to the west of Manassas now.
Right.
And then now it probably needs to be widened.
Bypass.
It needs another bypass. Well, there was, and again, many people don't remember this, but the original transportation plan for the Washington metropolitan area didn't call for another beltway outside of.
I've seen that. Yeah.
Even to the west of us. So they had great vision, but
Yeah. I mean, it's just like extending the bypass to the west of Dulles. And that seemed like a pretty good idea to me, but ultimately, for whatever reason, it was a no-go.
Right.
Yeah. I mean, I think maybe they were worried about development. If you put that highway out there, they will come kind of thing.
Well, and I think there was a lot of opposition from that area, which at the time was pretty rural.
Yeah.
It's changed a lot now, but roads are not necessarily everybody's favorite thing to have in their backyard.
No, they're not. How long did you work on the bypass for?
That was probably 4 or 5 years, and the backstory on that is that it actually was on the plans for many, many years, but we couldn't get any funding for it from the state. So a group of property owners convened, and I got involved with them, and we came up with an idea, and the idea was that the property owners would donate the right-of-way for the road to VDOT on the condition that they started construction or funding of it within a specific date. And so what we were doing was offering them many millions of dollars worth.
They gave away the dirt?
Yeah, they gave away the dirt.
That's unbelievable.
Yeah. And once that happened, then what happened was, Chuck Colgan got involved, Harry Parrish got involved, and went to VDOT. And, I described it as we have to get this spigot that is stuck just to start to drip.
Right.
And so what happened was they sponsored a bill to get design money. And once you start that process, it just kind of then naturally rolls from there. So once we got the spigot to drip in Richmond, then ultimately we wound up getting the road.
I can't believe they gave away the right of way.
Well, it was not, part of it was when you have a major road going through your property becomes a lot more valuable.
Well, I guess there is maybe there is some enlightened self-interest there.
Oh, yeah. Yeah. So, but you look at it and say, hey, that's a win-win.
It really is.
The public wins, the private property owners win, and thank God we have it, today.
Oh, can you imagine?
If everything was on Sudley Road?
I mean, as it is in the afternoon and in the morning, that bypass is super busy.
It is.
And Sudley Road is just, Sudley Road's a mess. 28's a mess. Everything's a mess. And then Godwin Drive Extended got canceled by the county. And so, now you have these 3-lane roads up in Fairfax that end at a 2-lane bridge.
Right. Yeah, I remember sitting on 28 one morning. I had left Manassas, and an hour and a half later, I was at the bridge.
I remember way back in the day riding with my dad to Dulles Airport when 28 was 2 lanes. And we were driving, he had a Carmen Ghia, which is a little convertible, right?
Yeah.
And we got past Law's auction, and I could see up ahead, and it seemed just an endless stream of taillights, and we were moving at like 4 miles an hour.
Yes.
And I don't feel like it's gotten a lot better.
Well, haven't been up that way too much anymore in the morning, but it was really a mess.
Yeah. And all of that stuff has received quite a lot of attention and money.
Right.
But the growth is just unstoppable, really.
Well, and it's like anything else. There's good parts to growth and there's hard parts to growth. But when Cindy and I, my late wife, were living here, I remember her one time saying, when we moved here, I could get to any place in Manassas in 10 minutes.
Yeah.
And now I have a hard time getting out of my driveway in 10 minutes. I said, well, that's true. That's true. But then think of it this way. When we moved here, we had a choice between 2 restaurants.
Yeah.
The McDonald's on 28 and the McDonald's on Sunday Road.
Yeah. There wasn't, in the 70s, there was not a lot here. Going to McDonald's when I was a kid was a real treat. It was there. I think there was one other, the Gallery or Galleria maybe, that was on 28. But, that was like a grown-up restaurant. You didn't take your children to that. So I didn't get to go there. But yeah, you're right. I mean, you can get basically anything you want almost inside of the city limits. I mean, Harris Teeter's got just about everything food-wise. You got to go to Wegmans for some stuff, but
well, it's a natural maturation of an area when you're adjacent to a metropolitan area like Washington. You're going to grow,
yeah,
and
yeah.
I think the key thing is growing in a way that while there's always going to be some issues, that at the end of the day you say we made some pretty good decisions, and all of us we're the beneficiaries of decisions that were made so many years ago.
Yeah.
Examples, the hospital. And that was a group of local business people that got together. And I think most people here don't have any idea about this. I didn't have any idea about it until I was talking to Harry Parrish one time, and he said, we had kids going around with tin cups, collecting quarters and dimes and nickels and dollar bills in order to be able to build the hospital.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah. I was born there not too long after it opened. So I remember going in there, and there, they have the wall with the donors. Back then, not now. There's a lot more people in. But, there were not a lot of names on that wall for a facility like that.
No, it was, really amazing. And you're watching that grow now, and with the good fortune of having UVA here, facility, so it's very, very, very positive. So, but, that long range vision is something that really every community needs to have.
Yeah, and that's tough. It can be tough to come by because it comes in drips and drabs. And, when I was on the council, I would say I was on for 8 years. A good 3 years of that was spent dealing with the Great Recession. When the Great Recession is happening, people don't have a lot of interest. And, we're going to build a road out here, or we're going to buy this piece of land. They're just trying to keep, all the plates spinning. So it's kind of like time and tide, for these things to intersect and give the community an opportunity to do it.
Yeah, and the Hilton Performing Arts Center, and the Freedom Center is a great example of that intersection you're talking about. My children were heavily involved in swimming, including year-round swimming, and so I was involved with a group of parents, and we were petitioning the city to build an indoor pool.
Right.
And actually, I think the plans got advanced to a certain extent within the city. And then somebody said, well, what about, I heard George Mason's getting ready to do a rec center. So, that then led to, the formation of that tri-party agreement for Manassas and the county and George Mason, and actually wound up building that facility, which is a great facility.
It is. It's a good example of leverage. Leveraging that agreement to get something done, because everybody brought something to the table.
Right.
And that allowed us to do that. Same with the VRE parking deck. That was another one where we were leveraging a lot of federal money, I guess it was.
Right.
But yeah, that's a great example of that. And then the Hilton too, I guess to some extent was the same.
Well, the Hilton basically was kind of a direct result of the Freedom Center, because we proved we could work together,
right,
and do that. And then it was, I think, also Kathleen Seafelt dream to make sure that we were moving more towards having a cultural, center for the county and reputation-wise. As a matter of fact, I remember being at opening night. And I was asked to make a few remarks, and what they said was something along these lines, which is, this building is not only going to be a building, it's going to be building our reputation as a community.
Right.
And it's going to not only change the way that others look at us, but it's going to change the way we look at ourselves. And, when you have a facility like that, the civic pride and the reputation and all aspects of it are really very positive for everybody.
They are, because Manassas had that kind of reputation. I remember talking to, I don't remember who it was, but I think that they were involved with when IBM was over here, and IBM, they not a lot of their employees lived in the area. You know, they lived
Right.
farther east, and they said that they struggle with that. I don't remember who told me this, but it was his job basically to try and get them to live in this area, because IBM had a big thing about being involved in the community and
Yes,
stuff like that.
yes.
And that's why, like Maury, he had time to serve on, Maury Gerson, had time to work on city matters because IBM gave him that time,
Right.
as I recall. So no, I mean, that was a big deal, and it takes decades. You know?
Yeah, these are all long-term projects, so it requires a lot of dedication and a lot of luck to a certain extent, and
Yeah.
and I think the biggest thing is putting together the right team, and if you have the right people, trying to move something forward, and they have the experience and having done it before, then, that's really what you need to have.
Yeah, it really is, and that can be hard to come by.
Well, yeah. Again, it's becoming harder all the time because I think with the press of business and everything else in the pace of what happens in the world today, people do not have that kind of time.
No.
And it's very hard to get people to say, hey, I need you to come to a meeting every week for the next 4 or 5 years, to make this happen.
Yeah, that's tough. I mean, it's hard for me to make Rotary every week.
Right.
And that's at lunch.
Right.
It's not like the Kiwanis Club I used to belong to, which was like at 7:30, I think.
Right.
But the problem with that is they met on Tuesday morning after I had council meetings. And, sometimes council meetings end at 8 o'clock. Sometimes they end at midnight.
Right.
I ain't going to be there at 7:30.
Right. So if you look at it, we have this tremendous resource of people that had time and the desire, and combine that with community leaders and combine that with a vision, and that's how these things happen.
Yeah. Whose idea was the Hilton?
I think Kathleen Sheffield
Was it?
was that, and then Bill Reeder, who was the first dean. He wanted to see.
I mean, you let Reader loose on anything, and
it ultimately happened. He was an amazing guy, and he just passed away here.
Yeah, I saw that.
Just a few weeks ago. And what a legacy.
Bill was something else.
Well, he had that unique ability to get people to say yes, and that meant that yes, we'll do the project. And more importantly, yes, I'll give you money to make the project happen.
Right. Yeah. Well, and he helped me out a couple of times, just like, advice kind of things. And, 10 minutes with him, especially where subjects where I wasn't all that conversant in what was going on, he could help clarify for me.
Yeah. Well, he and I had a lot of discussions about business management.
Is that right?
Yeah, I mean we both had an interest in that, and he had read about it extensively, and he had managed facilities, so he was really kind of a Renaissance man.
He was,
in the sense that he knew and understood business, he knew and understood higher education, he knew and understood politics, and he knew how to raise money.
He knew how to raise money, man. No doubt about that. I ran into him for the first time, maybe on the Did Lake board. I think he was on the Did Lake board for a while. And I was trying to get Did Lake to work with another nonprofit that I was on their board.
Right.
I thought that they would be eager to help, and Bill told me no. And then he gave me like a list of tasks, like these are the things you got to do to prove that you guys really want it. And that turned out to be insanely beneficial, just because he had been in this area. I had never been on a board of a nonprofit of that type. So that was a little weird. One of the things that you mentioned was that, that big idea, that future planning. When I was on council, that's one of the things that when we had retreats, invariably came up. Like, what's the next big thing? And I even put together an initiative regarding the next big thing, right?
Yes.
And so when you look at And this isn't political really, but like you look at, the city has made investments, the EDA has made investments, and we do have, it's 20 years old at this point, a sector plan for Mathis. Do you feel like that's the next big thing, or?
Well, I think it depends upon what your idea is of what's the next big thing. Yeah, I often have asked myself the question of, if you're looking at making Manassas and the Manassas area a world-class location,
Right.
what's missing in order to be able to provide that? And I mean, there's a lot of things that go into making a world-class city.
Yeah.
And so to me, you kind of sit down and say, what are our ideas what are the top 6 things that, that a world-class city or area
Right.
has for its residents and its reputation? And then what is lacking? And how do we go about doing that? I think the Hilton was a good example of that, because that's one where it's reputational. It hits the cultural button. And so, are there other projects out there like that, the community can rally around to be able to advance the community?
Right.
For a long time, I said that, I thought this area was like a baseball prospect, a professional baseball prospect. And what I meant by that was that, there's this raw talent there, and there's so much opportunity. You could see it when it was coming.
Right.
And so, you had this prospect and you had all these great opportunities. And then every once in a while, the guy would catch a ball that should go over the fence, and you're thinking, wow, this is really great.
Right.
And then they drop a fly ball, a routine fly ball. So you had to have this natural evolution in the community to be able to get to the point where you're saying, yeah, you're ready for the big time.
Right.
And that's kind of the thinking that I'm talking about is, how do we continue to advance, towards a goal of becoming even better than we are today?
And that's the $1 million question. How do you get there from here? I think that the GMU projects were, I'm not saying they're simple, but they were natural, in my view, because it was an expanding campus in any event, and you had leverage when you joined together with the other partners. Stuff that in the middle of Manassas you may have a tough time. I guess you could find a developer or somebody that would joint venture with the city, but it's a little less natural, maybe.
Well, it is, but ultimately, you have to have regional cooperation on just about any major project that you do, and even if it's located on the boundaries of the city, there have been investments made by jurisdictions in other jurisdictions. And that's when people are saying, we're going to set aside the fact that we happen to have an artificial boundary here because we're all going to benefit.
Right.
And when you look at a project where everybody benefits, then you have a better chance of bringing them all to the table. And when you bring them all to the table, you have a better chance of success.
That's kind of like the way that the fire and rescue system works.
Right.
The city built that new station essentially in Prince William County. But, there are overlapping networks of where people are first due. So, yeah, especially in something like that, because fire and rescue is horribly expensive.
Yes.
Anything you need to staff 24/7 at the PD.
Right. And the equipment's not cheap either.
And the equipment. I got to tell, when we replaced the tower truck in Manassas, I almost fell out of my chair. Like I don't know whether it was a lower end model, but a middle of the road, ladder truck, $1 million.
Yes, I would have expected that.
Yes. And that was in 2008-ish. And I couldn't believe it. But, every one of these things is nearly a custom build.
Right.
So, yeah, it weighs, tons. It's giant. It has a 100-foot ladder. It's $1 million.
Right.
And when you have to fix it, it's bad. But yeah, so I don't know. I hear a lot of talk about that. The city's buying a lot of property, and I don't love some of it, but I do think that it does provide opportunity for the city to try and do some of these bigger things.
Well, yeah. you need to have, I think the starting point though is you need to have that vision.
Yeah.
And it's great to have resources, but that's kind of almost getting the cart in front of the horse in the sense that, what are we going to do with what we have? And,
Right.
And so I think that vision you said is 20 years old or so.
Yeah.
And, the good news is, I think we're probably at a point where that redevelopment can happen. I handled the rezoning of the Manassas Mall recently to go into a mixed-use project. We got approval for over 1,000 units there,
Wow.
residential units, on some of the undeveloped land that people didn't even realize existed.
That farm.
No, it was actually on the mall proper. There were
Oh, wow.
There were three relatively small pads. So these are going to be multi-story buildings. And so the developer is out of Florida and is used to doing some pretty high-end projects, and saw Manassas in buying the mall as an opportunity to bring a kind of a really Class A mixed-use project to the area. And unfortunately, that was in the county. But again, that upgrading of that whole area, is really critical. I was urging the county for a number of years to take a look at what's happening on Sudley Road, because with the changing dynamics of retail, et cetera, we were seeing a lot of worrisome signs.
Yeah.
And, we had the experience of Route 1 on the other end of the county.
Yeah.
And once you get to a particular point in decline, it's really difficult and expensive to turn that around. And so I give a lot of credit to the county for having now a Sudley Road redevelopment plan. And and they identified the mall as being a key point to kick it off.
It's a natural fit.
Yeah. And so that's now been approved, and I hope the economy holds up well enough that it can move forward. Going back to your point,
Right. Yeah, and there, it's interesting. The strip mall where like Total Wine used to be, and the ABC store and the bookstore. That thing, they moved out several large tenants, and now, they have a huge gym there, and I don't know what the other retail spots are going to be, but it seems like it's almost like a commercial redevelopment inside of the existing space.
Well, yeah, and that's common. I mean, you're going to have that turnover. The difficulty was when you look at the retailers that were there,
right,
and then in some instances being replaced by, I'll call them value retailers.
Yeah.
It changes the dynamic. It changes the image. It changes the feel.
Yeah.
And it takes you further away, to step backwards away from trying to get into that world-class situation.
Right. And there's not a whole lot of world-class to go around. I mean, you have to provide a reasonable prospect for them to make money.
Absolutely. You can't, and then that's, always a constraint on government. Government can do a lot of things, but ultimately you have to have the private sector somebody's going to take the risk.
Yeah.
And then somebody's going to raise the money, and somebody's that is able to make it happen.
Yeah.
And that's the private sector. And that goes back to many of the things we were talking about, that even the private sector providing leadership and talent and ideas and pushing the county and the city in some ways,
right,
historically. And I don't mean that in an adversarial way. I mean in a very, very cooperative fashion. And when you can bring those two major forces together, the private sector and the government, that's when you can really get a lot done.
Yeah, well, that goes back to leveraging pots of money and pots of talent and stuff like that. And yeah, I agree. I mean, it's been a minute since I was involved in city affairs, but when I was first elected, we had that huge deal with the learners.
Right.
And I mean, you talk about leverage; those guys have got it. And the Great Recession killed that, but
yes.
That's ideal. But that's I feel like for a city like Manassas, that's going to be deals with guys like that are going to be tough. That's just they're involved doing. I feel like almost everybody switched to doing data centers in any event. So many of that stuff, but it's it's not like those projects are going away. The rush towards AI and stuff like that requires ever more computing. So it just kind of is what it is.
Well, it's like roads or, or electricity, everybody wants electricity, but nobody wants a tower,
Yeah.
and so I keep coming back to this fact that, there's a good and a bad with just about everything. And,
Sure.
and the goal is always to make sure that the good outweighs the bad.
Yeah.
And doing it in a way that doesn't divide the community if you can get there.
Yeah.
That's another big part of it, because we have so many different kinds of divisions in the communities now, and that's one of the things that I think has changed about Manassas, and it's inevitable because of growth again.
Yeah.
But when everybody knew everybody, when you go walk into a restaurant, what 80-90% of the people that were in that restaurant.
Well, like when City Tavern was in Old Town.
Right.
I mean, you went to lunch there. It took an hour and a half because it took 30 minutes to get in and out.
Yeah, exactly. Everybody was, we had to have those conversations.
Yeah.
So, some of those natural meeting places, and the time to do that, to spend that extra 30 minutes talking to people, unfortunately have evaporated. And so we've got to find new methods to be able to deal with all of that.
Yeah. I mean, that's kind of the idea behind this whole podcast thing, is just to try and get people to listen to it and talk about those things. I mean, for whatever it's worth, I think that the city has done an excellent job with their data center developments. They're appropriately placed.
Right.
You would, I guess you could have built houses over there by where Falcon used to be. I guess you could have, but I feel like data center, that's not a bad use at all. And it's certainly over there at the brick factory.
Right. Right. Yes. Properly located, they are, they can operate in a way that is not offensive.
Yeah.
But it has to be, location specific, of course.
Yeah. And I feel like for the city, it was a little bit easier citing those than the other jurisdictions in the area and to the west of us that are having challenges about where to put those things. Do you turn farms into data centers? But of course, this is the exact same discussion we were having in the 80s when the city was busy turning farms into houses.
Well, there's, having been involved in land use for a long time, we always talked about NIMBY, not in my backyard.
Yeah. The
new phrase is banana. Build absolutely nothing anywhere near anybody.
I have not heard that. Yeah. That's a thing. I remember when, I guess the first development over there, maybe it was Waterford, and it was basically, Johnson Farm. Right. And my dad's surveying firm, this was way before GPS or anything.
Right.
We laid out the baseline for that entire development, and we did it by sighting the North Star.
Wow.
Yeah. So we're out there in a field. It's like 11 o'clock at night, with a tripod and a theodolite, and we have lighted, targets, and we're trying, you would just never do anything like that.
Well, technology is amazing. I still remember the first time I tried to call somebody, and I got this really funny sound on the other end of the phone. Ding, some tones. And I tried 2 or 3 times, and I finally called the operator, once you could actually speak to an operator. And
right.
Said, I'm having trouble getting through to this number. And she said, let me look. And she came back and she said, oh, that's because it's a fax machine. And I said, what? What is a fax machine? And then it wasn't too long after that where I don't remember who had one, but like one person in the whole city had a fax machine, and people would go over and say, can I borrow your fax machine to fax things out? And so, and then ultimately we did that. But you look back and you say, I think about what happened in the prior generations, how fast that moved.
Yeah.
And, from World War II forward. But we forget when we look back how all of that, started. When I started practicing, people were still using carbon paper,
Yeah. Yeah, for sure. My daughter, who's approaching 30, so I guess they would call her like a digital native, right?
Right.
She tried calling our next door neighbor at one point when she was a kid to ask if the next door neighbor could let the dog out or whatever it was. And so she takes her cell phone and dials it, And she kind of holds it up to her ear and then looks at it and hangs up and dials it, puts it up to her ear. And I said, well, what's going on? What's the problem? She says, well, it's making this funny noise. And I said, what is it? She goes, beep, beep, beep. I'm like, that's a busy signal. She had no idea because all of her friends, of course, have voicemail by now.
Right.
Everyone's got a cell phone. Next door neighbor, Margie, she has a phone that hangs on the wall.
Landline. It is amazing. Well, a lot of changes in business. Next month will be my 50th year as an attorney.
Wow.
And I think I must have slept through 2 or 3 decades because, it's just amazing to me to be able, even just to say that, but the changes in the technology, but what hasn't changed is, how many good people there are that do good things. And that gets lost in the process. And, every day, people come to work, they do a good job, they go home to take care of their families.
Yeah.
We lose sight of that too readily. And, we are very fortunate when you look around the country to live in the community that we live in.
We are. It's a unique spot. We've had any number of upheavals and things like that, but Manassas it's located in a place that, well, until recently with the turmoil in the federal government, has been a steady employer, and I think it probably still is a steady employer. We're going to have a spike, and this is increasingly where the jobs and the money is, right?
Right.
I talked to my daughter. She talks about moving to different places, and if you're young, go do whatever you want, but just remember that, like, when the rest of the country is suffering, we don't suffer quite so bad.
No, it's a great economic engine, and I remember a lot of discussion decades ago talking about how we're going to diversify, because everybody's always been nervous.
Yeah.
About what happens if the federal government doesn't stop spending a lot of money, and here we are.
Yeah.
But we are so much more diversified than we were. When I first came here, it was, like 90%, of commerce was tied in some fashion to the federal government, or the spinoffs. But now there are so many other major corporations here, so the diversification has occurred because, look, the capital of the United States is going to always attract major businesses.
Yes.
And it's always going to provide a fair amount of employment. So, we can't predict what the future is, but, from my perspective, I think the future for this area is still very bright.
I think so. And your point about diversification is well taken. When IBM decided they were leaving, I wasn't on the council, but I remember, I think Hal probably told me that the budget hole, they decided to raise taxes enough to fill 1/3 of it, defer spending to fill 1/3 of it, and cut 1/3. And it was a lot of money, especially back then.
Yeah. Oh, yes.
We had a Great Recession. We had a problem, but I don't think it was the same scale.
No. Well, when you only have one business that's providing you that much of your budget, you're always holding your breath.
Yeah.
Because as we know, especially as, the world is changing as rapidly as it is, you never know when somebody's going to make a decision to go somewhere else, or your technology becomes old, or your plant becomes obsolete.
Yeah.
But, the great story of America, from my perspective, is, we are constantly reinventing ourselves.
It can be messy.
It can. Oh, it is messy.
Like it is. It's messy right now.
Right. But when you look at what Manassas, you just look at different buildings in Manassas, or what happened to the IBM property.
Yeah.
It's now in Micron, right?
Yeah.
And BAE Systems. So we've been fortunate to be able to backfill, and the backfills have been as good or better than what was there here originally.
They have. Manassas has been curiously lucky. We lose IBM, and now Micron just spent almost $3 billion out there,
right,
to upgrade their factory. And the way that Micron works, the different units compete for that work,
right.
And so it's unbelievable that we were the recipient of that. Now, it took the feds and the state and the city to make it happen, but yeah, it's remarkable.
Well, and I think that's a really important point here, which is, as I recall, that there was a lot of competition for that $3 billion upgrade being done somewhere else.
Yeah.
And that, it was the sense of the community and the state working together hand in hand, that when people came here and they saw that, they were like, this is where we want to be.
Yeah.
And don't talk about a compliment.
Right.
A $3 billion compliment.
Right. That's a vote of confidence, especially from a company like Micron. I mean, I would bet that the vast bulk of their chip manufacturing is offshore. Because I think they have a fab in Boise. They have one here. I think the balance of it's in Taiwan, China.
Well, I mean, your point's well taken. Manassas today is part of the world.
Yeah.
And what I mean by that is, businesses can locate anywhere. It didn't, you don't have to build next to the coal mine.
Right.
So, so there you can be anywhere. And so that goes back to part of what my thought process is with regard to, having a world-class community. That's what attracts business. That's what attracts talent. That's what attracts people.
Right.
And so that's all the raw material of long-term success. And so having those things is something we need to always keep in mind.
Yeah, it's when you're down in the trenches, that can be hard to keep your eye on. But you're absolutely right.
Well, I think it was Steve Jobs who said, and it may have been somebody else that said, the best day that I have in business is the day I walk into my office and I have nothing to do. He said, because then I can think about the future.
He's right.
Yes. And I was reading somewhere else that one of the great faults of a lot of businesses is that the problems rise to the level of the CEO. And the CEO's job is not to solve problems. It's for him to have people in place to solve the problems. And my view was that, the role of the CEO of any business, small business, medium-sized, large business, is basically to provide a vision, to provide energy to the organization, and to hold people accountable. And if you can do those three things as a business person, then I think your business has a chance to succeed.
Yeah, I think it's tough I think it's the proclivity, especially of small business owners, to say, well, that's great for a guy that has 1,000 employees. And yeah, that job looks different, but it has a lot of the same problems. And, one of the best business books I ever read was The E-Myth.
Right. Yes.
And,
I think I mentioned that too.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I was in the middle of rehabbing my back, and I was doing that out at the Freedom Center, and I was reading the E-Myth during it, and I felt like the author had literally been following me around for the last 5 years.
Right.
And, the great phrase, work on your business, not in it. Now, when you have 2 or 3 employees, that can be hard to do, but it was life-changing for me. It really was, because if you want your business to make these, leaps to the next size, or, the next $1 million or whatever it is, you have to have a plan for that.
Well, yeah. I mean, I've probably used the word vision too many times in our conversation here, but that's really what the book is largely about, which is, certainly they're building systems into your business to be able to do those different kinds of things. But, when I'm trying to grow the firm, when I went on vacation, I would always take 2 books with me. The first was a business book, a book like the E-Myth or something else along those lines. And the first part of the vacation, I'd read that book and I'd underline it. And then I would say, okay, what are the 3 things that I can take away from this book to apply to my business in order to help us grow and to succeed? And then the next one was, okay, well, I need a good, mystery novel.
Right.
Because I got to go back to work in a few days.
Right. I've got to decompress somehow. Right.
But to your point, you have to separate yourself from the day to day in order to be able to do that, and to always constantly try to learn and improve your skills as a manager and as a leader.
And it takes separation to be able to do that. You cannot do it. I don't care how smart you are. You cannot do that inside of your business day-to-day grind. It may, you may have an occasional flash of insight, but you're not going to have that sort of high level, top down moment where you're sort of like, we have to do A, B, and C. Or if that comes to you while you're reading a book or you're walking. I mean, we used to, for instance, at Matrix, we used to write the software that we used to manage the business. And it was taking up a fair amount of time. We only had a handful of employees, right? And I was at Outer Banks, and we were having resource problems, but we really didn't have the money to hire another body. And I remember I was pacing back and forth on the beach in front of the beach house. And I don't remember how long it was exactly, but when it occurred to me, we're not in the software business, I stopped like I'd been struck by lightning. And I looked down, and there was a trench where I had been pacing back and forth. And that was a huge change, because I was like, well, people write this software. What are we doing? And, it didn't cost nearly an employee, right, to get the software for the business. Right. And it was cloud-based. So, over the next month, we migrated to that, and away we went. So it's that separation is so important when it comes to that kind of planning or thought process.
Yeah, I think, an example of that for me was, we were renting offices in different locations, et cetera, et cetera. And we always were looking to the business community. We kind of started out as basically a law firm that was focused on the business and real estate communities. And I realized if we have an opportunity to build our own building,
right,
and that would be a game changer. And it was, but it had to be a particular kind of building. And more importantly, the space inside the building had to be a particular kind of thing.
Right.
So we had an architect who then had an interior decorator that came in. And I said, look, this is, we want CEOs to walk in here and say, these people get it.
Right.
And she came back with a palette of gray and brown. And I said to her, this is no disrespect, but this looks just like a dentist's office.
Right. Right.
So she said, well, okay, I'll come back. So this time she came back, instead of gray and brown, it was brown and gray. and at that point, I'm like, thank you, but no thank you.
Yeah.
And Cindy, my late wife, and I were in Asheville, and we were walking around in an art gallery. And it struck me then that I had been given some advice when I was just starting to practice. An attorney said to me, never put money into your surroundings. Buy art. Because when you leave, it goes with you. And otherwise, you're just improving the value of somebody else's building.
Right.
So anyway, I looked at Cindy, and we were talking, and I said, what if we kind of used the concept of almost an art gallery for our public spaces?
Right.
And she said, yeah, I think that's a really good idea. So that's what we did, as for a bit in our offices. So kind of full circle, I did have a CEO walk in and say, after we talked a while, he said, I got to tell you, as soon as I walked in here, I knew you guys were going to be performing at a certain level of quality. And that I'm comfortable because of that. So, that same kind of thing.
Makes a difference.
It makes a big difference. And so, there's an aha moment in every successful business. And if you're lucky, they keep coming.
Right. Yeah. I mean, it's when Matrix was smaller, we were in that little brick house over on West Street, and that was fine. We had just local businessmen as customers, and they get it, right? They're little businesses too. Right. But when we landed a couple of larger customers, I don't want to say it was a problem, but it sets a different expectation.
Yes.
And that at some point was why we moved over here. And we had kind of outgrown that space.
Right.
I mean, I loved having lunch in the backyard under the umbrella, but that's not the job of that building.
Well, yeah. And, and as you grow, you do have to give up some things, and the real challenge you have, I think, in operating a business is, as you grow, maintaining the culture.
It's tough.
It's very difficult to do that. Yeah, because the larger you get, the more difficult it is to infuse the culture and to keep it in the forefront of what you're doing.
Yeah, well, in an IT, there's all sorts of mobility. So it can become hard to hold on to people. Especially in our area, because in our area, once you have a couple of years of IT experience, and if you can get a clearance, you can make a lot of money.
Right.
So it becomes tough for guys like me sometimes to hold on to people like that. And other guys in the area who run similar businesses, I'm friends with these guys. They're my competitors, but we're not going to bash each other in the head. Everyone says the same thing.
Well, the other problem, even like for us, from a technology perspective, it really enhances the ability for others to come in and try to get your talent.
Yeah.
And we did have a few years ago. I mean, we really focused hard on getting really, really good people. As you have to have really, really good people.
Yeah.
But once you have really good people, other people want them.
Yeah.
So we had a situation where a law firm in New York City offered a couple of our people jobs to work remotely.
Oh yeah.
Could pay them very well because they were billing them at New York City rates.
Sure.
For the work.
Sure.
And so we lost a couple of people, but I think ultimately at the end of the day, there's still a lot of good people that want to be somewhere where they're around other people, they have a culture, and they're feeling that they're part of something. And I think it's very hard for people to, sitting at home, as much as they say, well, sitting at home in my pajamas is going to be wonderful, that there's a lot, as we all know, there's a lot of downside.
It's the worst. I can't work remotely because I need boundaries, right? I know this about myself. And if I'm at home working, I'll get up, I'll make coffee, eat some breakfast, open my laptop, start working. The next thing I know, it's getting dark and I'm sitting in my TV room in my underwear. It's just, I can't do it. I need sort of that change of place.
Yeah. For me, we never closed during the pandemic because we were an essential business, because we have a number of government clients. But, I've tried working from home for 2 weeks. And that was the end, because what became very apparent to me is I get a lot of energy from being around people.
Same.
And, and it's almost like slipping into a depression when you're just there by yourself, and
it's horrible.
I grew up in a big family. I had 5 brothers and sisters. I'm the oldest of 6. And, we lived with my grandmother. So there were 9 of us in a 3-bedroom house. So,
wow.
I was used to always being around people, but to this very day, I'm always happiest when I'm around a large group of people.
Yeah, there was a lot of Matrix kind of split. So we sent some people home and we kept some people in the office for a while. But you can't, there's a lot of stuff we can do remotely, but I can't set up a printer from my house. Right. I can't install a new computer or a monitor. So, but similarly, we didn't close either. But the remote work thing, it does seem like it's coming to an end somewhat.
Well, everything goes to excess and then has to be brought back and to be balanced. Remember when it was all of the shared office, everybody in the world is going to just go to one of these shared office places.
Yes.
I forget the name of the company that
Regis
tried to do an IPO. And, it didn't work because, when people started looking at their books, they realized they got a lot of space, but they don't have a lot of customers.
Right. Yeah. I don't think those, well, I don't know what their current state is. We have one customer that uses it, but they're based in another city. So outside this state. So, it's an occasional space for them. And I think that's fine. But the remote work thing is just not, I think it's good that it's an option for people now, and there are some jobs, to be sure, that can efficiently be done 100% remote, but it's tough, and you have to have the right kind of people that can do that. And, these are people who are disciplined. When it's time to work, they work. They're not also watching TV,
right?
Which is what happens to me.
Right. Well, and I think part of it goes back when you're talking about culture, you're not only talking about the culture of the company or the individuals that are there, but it's also the culture of the community.
Yeah.
you know, and if you are getting your energy from and you're getting your rewards from being part of a community, you know, that's huge.
Yeah.
And I think that this area still has that there's still, it's not the way that it used to
It's
be.
not the way it used to.
But having said that, it's all a matter of looking at other places and, you know, looking at Fairfax. I mean, when I started practice, I didn't want to practice in Fairfax. I didn't want to live in Fairfax because to me, it was just too big, too disconnected. I lived in Annandale. To this day, I can't tell you what Annandale is. I don't know where it starts. I don't know where it ends. It's got a sign
Right.
that says it's Annandale, but I don't know what it is or where it is. It doesn't have a downtown.
Right. No.
You know, so, you know, that's, you know, we miss sometimes the fact that, you know, having this old town, everybody loves it. You know, it really provides an anchor to the community in a very unique kind of a way.
It's a center of gravity, for sure.
Yes.
Went back, and I guess in the early 2000s, the city had a study done by a trade association, actually, and the study was, how do we expand Old Town? How do we connect it to like Mathis Avenue?
Right, I remember that.
Yeah, and the reply from the consultant was like, "What are you doing? You know, focus on old. You have this thing. No one else has this. Not exactly that, but you have this train station. You have this whole hub of activity. Make that better. Let Mathis Avenue do Mathis Avenue."
Right.
And, you know, I think that at the time we were just sort of casting about, you know, what are people with more experience? Do we have other options? And the answer was, yeah, you have other options. Make Old Town better.
Right.
And so I do think that's what the city's trying to do now. But, you know, those projects like that, they're a struggle to put together in the best of times. I mean, you know that firsthand, right?
Yeah, it's very, very, very complicated. You know, I think back also to when I came to Manassas back in the mid to late 70s. I can't remember how many buildings were boarded up.
Oh yeah.
I mean, there were like 30, something like that. And then Loy Harris, whose name is now associated with the Harris Pavilion, where the ice skating rink is at.
Yep.
That used to be, I think that used to be an old warehouse.
Yeah.
And, you know, and he again spurred the community and took it up on himself to push the council, and he went out and raised money and
He did.
some donations from us and many other people.
Yeah.
And said, no, we're going to make this into a park.
Do you know that I oppose that? I don't know. I don't remember what year it was, and no one cared what I thought, frankly, at the time. But there used to be this little parking lot right there on the corner, right where the Harris Pavilion is. I don't know, it was like 6 or 8 spaces. And I used to park there to go to the bookstore.
Oh.
So I opposed getting rid of those parking spaces. I don't know how old I was. I was probably 30 something, whatever, 35. But yeah, no, I didn't think that was a good idea either. Yeah, he literally threw Old Town on his back and carried it.
Yes. Well, he owned the old opera house.
Yeah. When it was the gourmet store.
Right.
And it had the wine and cheese and cigars and everything. And that place. I loved it. But I remember when I was a kid, I basically went from my parents' place on Bennett Drive to the Five and Dime to Roars.
Right.
And then back, because the rest of Old Town was blighted. You know, it was kind of hit and miss.
Right.
It wasn't great.
Well, you know, and in many ways, we were very fortunate that it didn't get, you know, raised and somebody came in and said, you know, we're going to start doing things differently, or that it didn't just fall into complete disrepair and people didn't want to touch it,
Right.
Which is kind of what happened a little bit, you know. But again, the natural forces of growth coming from the Washington metropolitan area here, really, we're so well positioned geographically that's what saved us.
Yeah. Yeah. That and a little bit of local, you know, determination that this is not going to be the way.
Right.
And other group, you know, HMI was
pretty
important there.
Yeah.
You know, their mission has changed a lot over the years. I have the original Harris Pavilion proposal from HMI.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. It's at my house someplace. And, you know, they've gone from sort of that to now they do events. And, you know, evolution in the mission is natural, right?
Right.
But it's just so different than it was then. And, they run First Fridays and things like that. And that's usually beneficial for the city. And it's not an easy thing to do. I was on the HMI board when we had First Friday for the first time when the weather was beautiful. It was a mob scene. It was unbelievable how successful it was. And, fortunately, there weren't any huge problems, just way too many people. And we didn't have enough police officers and stuff like that. So, but, we met with the PD and we figured it out. That's what they do. So but HMI, I think that, that's an organization that not a lot of people know about anymore.
Yeah, I was thinking, you're right. I was thinking about that. I was trying to think of the lady who headed it up for so many years.
Debbie? Debbie Haight ran it for a while.
Right. No, even before that.
Oh, Patricia Davis?
Davis.
Yeah.
Yes.
I'm not sure her first name was Patricia.
No, it wasn't. But I'm not even talking about
Mrs. How about that? Hayden Davis, his wife. Yeah.
So, I mean, Manassas has been blessed by having, good people over the course of its history.
She was determined.
Oh, she was. Yes. Well, but you know what? You need that. You need somebody. You're not going to, you can't get somebody that's comfortable with the status quo to lead things. I mean, a leader's got to be disruptive just by, the nature. That's what the job is, right?
Yeah. Yeah. Especially for them. I mean, they have to be careful because, the city pays for it. And if you cause too much trouble, you might get in trouble with the city manager, most likely.
Right.
But no, and I still feel like, there is time for them to be, their mission will evolve, right? That's the way it works.
Well, I mean, it's, as the community changes, they have to change. And then ultimately, I think, the city took over managing some of the things that they were doing. Yeah. And even events, events have to evolve because they get stale.
They do. I mean, I have people that ask me, like, well, what happened to the jazz festival or what happened to the beer festival or whatever it was? And, I was involved in some of those things and they took a lot of work. I mean, we needed an army of volunteers.
Right.
Because, at the end of the day, with the beer and wine festival or what it was, at the end of the day, you end up with some fair number of people who have had too much to drink, and it can be a real mess cleaning it up. So,
well, but I think that the point though is that we're also blessed that there's still a lot of volunteers. When you look across the spectrum of the community, and a lot of them is unseen. The work that's being done by the nonprofits.
Is that you?
Oh, okay. The work that's being done by the nonprofits and continues to be done by them here is really amazing.
Yeah.
And I do worry though that some of the nonprofits are having a harder time getting staffing. Just getting volunteers, members.
Yeah.
Membership is down nationally in a lot of the social clubs.
Rotary Club looks nothing like that lunchtime Rotary Club. That was the business Rotary Club.
Absolutely.
And I remember when I think it was probably Creston that invited me to come, I felt like I have a seat at the table. I'm not sure I belong here.
I felt the same way when I joined.
Yeah. But I had originally been in the evening Kiwanis Club. And then my daughter was born and I didn't have time for evening. So I switched to morning. And then I got elected and I kind of bailed out of that. And Creston said, well, come on to you've been in business, you've elected office, you do all these things. Come in, as a guest and do that. And I'm still a member, but, it's much smaller than it used to be.
Mm-hmm.
And, the folks there's not a lot of younger people that are in those service clubs.
Well, it's the challenge that you face of how do you evolve?
Yeah.
Look, it's the problem that almost every business faces, I think back to, when we had the local office supply store here.
Right.
With
Lou Maroon.
Yeah. And, businesses now are getting bigger and bigger and bigger. And so, how do we still keep a sense of community, and how do we keep a sense of volunteers, and how do we get support in dollars and otherwise when to a certain extent, the smaller businesses that they become successful and they're plucked up by somebody else.
It's not so small.
Fortunately, though, I think that this area, to me, seems to have always been a hotbed of entrepreneurism.
It is. It is. I mean, it's hard for me to dwell too long on that because I'm not sure where those people are anymore. When the Chamber of Commerce was in Old Town, down there by the sports pub, I mean, that's where it was. And the Chamber of Commerce has moved out to the west of here. They're still involved, but I don't have, like a lot of folks, I don't have the time to go to a lot of those events. So I don't know if they're there or not. I know that there's 1 Million Cups that meets down in Old Town. And when I see pictures on social media, there's a lot of people there. They look a lot younger than me.
Well, we have a tendency to look back and say, well, it's got to be the way that it was. But, the truth of the matter is it's like, progress is inevitable and things shift and things change. And you can, in some cases you can adapt, and in some cases you have to just say, had a great run.
Yeah.
And, it's time for somebody else to step in and do it a different way. So, and so social media has kind of displaced to a certain extent a lot of the, things that used to be really important to the clubs like Rotary or Quad or else, which was a place to get together to talk with other people that were like you and to try to do good things for the community.
Yeah. Yeah. And that's increasingly hard. I mean, I guess social media fundraisers can take the place of something like Rotary, but I don't know. It never replaced the human connection.
Well, yeah, and I think so. And I think there's still a big role for Rotary to play. And I think the real challenge is how do you get the digital age kids, if I can use that phrase, to recognize that value and the rewards that come from being involved in an organization where you are with people for decades and that you have a common goal of doing good things.
Right.
That is really, for me, has been just a really rewarding part of being part of the community and being involved in a lot of those different organizations.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, when I was on the Morning Kiwanis Club, their credo was, we raise all this money and we give it all away. We're not creating a foundation. No, we just don't do it. Now, Rotary works differently, but that was their thing. It was intensely local, right?
Right.
Rotary's a little bit wider lens, but those guys, they were passionate about raising whatever it was, $50,000 a year, and they gave it all away. And there were a lot of years where I think that Serve really depended upon their help.
And Rotary too. I know we had a goal of giving away $100,000 a year.
Yeah, you guys had like a sustaining sort of thing.
Right. We would pick a some nonprofit we wanted to support, and we would pledge to give them $100,000. It might take us 3 or 4 years to do it, but so we could you can make a meaningful difference, and and being part of those organizations still allows you to do that. In a way that you can't do it. You can't really do it. I mean, as you said, you can always write a check.
Right.
But, there's nothing as satisfying as being able to, work on a project and then be able to hand a check to somebody and say, here, go do good with what we're doing.
Right. And there was also, there's a big difference between Kiwanis and Rotary. Kiwanis they always had the ping pong balls and their other fundraiser. And then in Rotary, they're just like, well, we're going to give this organization X $1,000. We're just going to assess people for that money.
There's some of that, yeah. But there's a movement now to go back in the other direction.
Is that right?
Yes. Things like the cornhole tournament.
Yeah.
And the annual Super Bowl raffles and those sorts of things.
Yeah, they also do lunchtime Rotary. I think has a golf tournament too.
Yes.
Yeah.
But I think it's also a natural reaction to what we were talking about earlier, which is there are a few people that have the time.
Yeah.
Because to another point you made, it takes a lot of effort and a lot of time from volunteers in order to be able to put on these events.
Oh yeah.
And so it's much more difficult now to do than it was,
because
even 20 years ago.
yeah, I mean, the clubs are smaller, and it seems like the average age has gone up.
Right, and that's true all throughout
Yeah.
the country and across virtually all organizations. It's a different mindset. It appears to me.
It is. I mean, my dad used to talk a lot about 4-H. That was gone by the time I was a kid from Manassas.
Right.
We would have these dances, and we would have this and that and the other, and I couldn't fathom it.
Right. Right.
Well, Mike, is that about it? You think we've covered it?
Well, I think so, but you tell me. You're the expert.
I'm no expert. I'm no expert. All I do is set the microphones up and hit the red button on the GarageBand so it records it all. Well, look, thanks for coming in. I appreciate your time.
I enjoyed it. Thanks so much.
Yep.